Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. British Prime Minister Theresa May announced this morning she'll call for early elections, shocking the country as she tries to secure a stronger mandate for the controversial plan for Britain to leave the European Union, known as Brexit.
Our opponents believe, because the government's majority is so small, that our resolve will weaken and that they can force us to change course. They are wrong. They underestimate our determination to get the job done. And I am not prepared to let them endanger the security of millions of working people across the country. Because what they are doing jeopardises the work we must do to prepare for Brexit at home. And it weakens the government's negotiating position in Europe.
The early elections are set for June 8th. Prime Minister May officially initiated the two-year Brexit process last month. Meanwhile, in more news on European elections, France's left presidential candidate, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who has been compared to Bernie Sanders, is surging in the polls. A recent poll shows him polling a close third between the two front-running candidates, far-right-wing candidate Marine Le Pen and former economy minister Emmanuel Macron. Le Pen has promised to suspend all immigration to France. She recently sparked outrage when she denied the French role in rounding up Jews during World War II in Paris. The first round of France's presidential elections is on April 23rd. International monitors have issued a scathing critique of Turkey's referendum Sunday over whether to grant sweeping new powers to the president that critics warn could turn Turkey into a dictatorship. Turkish President Tayyip Recep Erdogan has claimed victory in the narrow vote, although the opposition says they've received thousands of complaints about voter fraud and other irregularities. On Monday, international monitors slammed the referendum, saying the playing field is unlevel and that the opposition faced repression. This is the head of one of the international monitoring teams.
Our team observed the misuse of administrative resources and the obstruction of efforts by parties and civil society organizations supporting the No campaign. The campaign rhetoric was tarnished by some senior officials, equating No supporters with terrorist sympathizers. In numerous cases, No sympathizers faced police interventions and violent scuffles at their events.
The Turkish government has rejected the criticism, calling it biased and prejudiced. Meanwhile, the U.S. is backing the referendum. On Monday, President Trump called Erdogan to congratulate him on winning the referendum. Trump has major business interests in Turkey. In 2015, he even admitted he had conflicts of interest in dealing with Turkey while speaking on Steve Bannon's radio show, Breitbart News Daily.
Well, I have a little conflict of interest because I have a major building in Istanbul, and it's a tremendously successful job. It's called Trump Towers, 2 towers instead of 1. Not the usual 1, it's 2. And I've gotten to know Turkey very well, and they're amazing people. They're incredible people.
At a press briefing Monday, White House spokesperson Sean Spicer refused to comment on the alleged fraud and irregularities in the referendum.
And start to make decisions without knowing. There were observers there, as there routinely are, and I'd rather wait and see.
To see our full interview on Sunday's referendum, go to democracynow.org. Vice President Mike Pence is in Japan today for talks with Deputy Prime Minister and other top Japanese officials amidst rising tensions between the U.S. and North Korea. On Monday, a senior North Korean official said North Korea would begin conducting missile tests weekly, despite demands from the U.S. and other countries for North Korea to put a halt to its nuclear program. The journalistic monitoring group Air Wars says dozens of Iraqi civilians were reportedly killed last week in airstrikes carried out by the U.S.-led coalition or the U.S.-backed Iraqi Air Force. Much of the bombing occurred in Mosul's Yarmouk neighborhood. On April 10th, airstrikes there repeatedly killed more than 30 civilians, including children. The following day, as many as 13 civilians were reported killed in airstrikes that destroyed homes in the same neighborhood. 6 more civilians were reportedly killed in airstrikes in Anbar province that same day. Meanwhile, in Syria, Air Wars says as many as 20 civilians reportedly died in multiple U.S. coalition airstrikes carried out in Raqqa early last week. On April 10th, up to 10 civilians, including at least 2 children, were killed in a series of alleged U.S. coalition airstrikes on 2 separate villages. That same day, local media reported an alleged U.S.-led coalition airstrike killed members of 2 families, including at least 1 child, when a home was bombed. More than a dozen Republican lawmakers are now calling on President Trump to release his tax returns, echoing the demand that inspired more than 100,000 people to take to the streets Saturday, Tax Day. On Monday, White House spokesperson Sean Spicer again said Trump did not plan to release his tax returns, saying Trump was under an audit. The IRS says being under an audit does not prevent anyone, including the president, from releasing one's tax returns, telling ABC, quote, nothing prevents individuals from sharing their own tax information, unquote. Trump is the first U.S. president in more than 4 decades to refuse to release his tax returns. Taxes are officially due today. We'll have more on Trump's taxes and this weekend's protests after headlines. The U.S. Supreme Court has halted the scheduled execution of at least 2 men as the state of Arkansas fights to carry out an unprecedented spate of executions in modern U.S. history. On Monday night, the Arkansas Supreme Court stayed the executions of Don Davis and Bruce Ward. This morning, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear a challenge by state officials, leaving Monday's stay in place. Under Arkansas's original plan, it was to carry out 8 executions in 11 days as the state scrambled to carry out the executions before the supply of one of the execution drugs expired. To hear our full interview with the Arkansas lawyer Lee Short, executive director of the Arkansas Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty, Ferunda Brasfield, and former death row prisoner Damian Eccles, go to democracynow.org. In Egypt, a court has acquitted Aya Hijazi, her husband, and 6 other charity workers of all charges after they were imprisoned for more than 3 years without trial. Hijazi, who grew up in Virginia and is a dual citizen of Egypt, was arrested on May 2, 2014, along with her husband and others, while running a nonprofit seeking to help homeless children in Cairo. She and her husband were accused of paying the children to participate in anti-government protests. To hear our interview about her with Sharif Abdel-Quddus, go to democracynow.org. As many as 1,500 Palestinian prisoners are now on hunger strike in 8 separate Israeli jails. Israeli prison officials have moved to retaliate against strike leader Marwan Barghouti, moving him to another prison and placing him in solitary confinement. In a New York Times op-ed piece published Monday, Barghouti wrote, quote, Israel has established a dual legal regime, a form of judicial apartheid that provides virtual impunity for Israelis who commit crimes against Palestinians while criminalizing Palestinian presence and resistance. Israel's courts are a charade of justice, clearly instruments of colonial military occupation, Barghouti wrote. On Monday, Palestinians rallied in support of the hunger strikers in the West Bank city of Bethlehem. The protesters were attacked by Israeli security forces. Among those to speak out in support of the hunger strikers was former Palestinian prisoner Khader Adnan.
When prisoners go on hunger strike, they feel the freedom. It is a way to resist the occupation. We can win the battle against it with our empty stomachs, and it is a message to the international community and the free people in the world that Palestinians seek freedom.
In Kashmir, about 100 protesting students were wounded after being attacked by Indian security forces who fired tear gas and rubber-coated steel bullets at demonstrators on Monday. The students demanded independence from Indian rule, chanting, "Go India, go back, and we want freedom." Dozens of students were also wounded by Indian security forces during protests over the weekend. In Mexico, journalist Maximino Rodriguez has been murdered, making him the 4th Mexican journalist in only 6 weeks to be assassinated. Rodriguez reported on the police, crime, and corruption for a blog called Colectivo Pericu. He was killed on April 14th in the city of La Paz. Mexico is one of the world's deadliest countries for journalists. Georgia is holding a special election today to fill the seat of former Congressman Tom Price, who's now the Secretary of Health and Human Services. With 18 candidates in the field, one of the leading contenders is 30-year-old Democrat Jon Ossoff, whose campaign slogan is "Make Trump Furious." The race is considered a test to see how much voters may have turned on President Trump, who has record-low support. Last Tuesday in Kansas, Republican Ron Estes won a congressional seat in a special election in a surprisingly close vote for a heavily conservative district. Estes beat the Democratic challenger James Thompson by a slim 53-46 margin in a district that Donald Trump carried by 27 percentage points last November. Facebook is facing criticism for not removing quickly enough a shocking and graphic video of a man killing a 74-year-old grandfather in Cleveland. The alleged shooter, Steve Stevens, posted the video of himself shooting and killing Robert Godwin Sr. as the grandfather was picking up aluminum cans on Sunday afternoon. It appears Stevens picked the man at random. A manhunt is underway to find Stevens. The video is among a series of shocking videos of rapes, suicides, and incidents of torture that have been live-streamed or posted on Facebook. And tens of thousands of people participated in the 121st annual Boston Marathon Monday. Among the runners was 70-year-old Kathrine Switzer, who in 1967 became the first woman ever to compete in the 26.2-mile race as an official entrant. At the time, the marathon was male only, so she entered under the name KV Switzer. Officials tried to force her off the course after a few miles, but she persevered and finished in 4 hours and 20 minutes. This is Kathrine Switzer.
I was the only female running wearing a bib. There actually was another woman up in the race who jumped out of the bushes and ran. But what kept me going was I had to make the decision. I mean, of course, I felt scared and humiliated and embarrassed. This official was attacking me in front of the press truck, for heaven's sakes. Yeah. But my boyfriend bopped the official and sent him out of the race instead. And I ran on to finish. But I made the decision to finish because I felt if I dropped out, then everybody would say, see, women are not welcome. They always barge into places where they can't do it anyway, and she's just a clown. And I knew I had to finish to prove that women could, should, and be allowed and to get opportunities for women in running. So that was very, very important for me. If I had quit, it would set women's running and women back.
That was Kathrine Switzer, the first woman officially registered for the Boston Marathon to complete the race. This year, she finished the race in 4 hours and 44 minutes, 50 years after that first race. And she still wore that same bib, number 261, the one she'd worn in 1967. The winners of this year's Boston Marathon were EDNA KIPLAGAT and KIRUI, both from Kenya. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.